Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of Achieve Results by Empowering Students in Math Intervention. We have a special guest with us today, Theda Fielding, who is at North Caddo High School in Shreveport, Louisiana. Now, she's going to share with us some of the challenges and learnings from the past year at Fair Park High School. Fair Park High School was awarded the gold medal school for 2016 by Ascend Education. Welcome, Theda.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Now, let me begin just by explaining that a large-scale study done by Ascend Education shows that 90% of 7th grade students targeted for intervention have gaps at least one full grade level below their current grade. In fact, the average class we looked at identified for intervention have gaps 2, 3, 4, or even more levels below their actual grade. And even within a given level, each of these students is unique with individual gaps. Now, this is the situation faced by Fair Park High School and by many others, and possibly by your school as well. Theda, would you like to explain a little bit more about the challenges that you faced?
Okay, we're an inner city urban school, Title I, approximately 750 students. 96% of them were African American, 95, 96, 97, free or reduced lunch, with a large special ed population. When I say large, I'm saying 18 to 20% of the students. So we looked at solutions. Ascend Math was a computer-based intervention platform that we found, and we had 309 T and 10 T. T is transition students who were unsuccessful in the classroom because they were unprepared for mathematics on a high school level. When I say unsuccessful, I mean they did not know what they needed to know. In January last year, we heard about this thing on a Friday, and we were up and running on Tuesday with the program. It was wonderful. Why did we do this? Our traditional instruction wasn't working. There was no way a teacher could plan lessons for 150 kids that were anywhere from 3rd grade to 8th grade level. And we just couldn't reach them. If we hit the 7th graders, the 3rd graders were climbing out the window, and etc. If we hit the 3rd graders, the 8th graders were beating up on each other. And we just weren't getting the results that we needed with traditional instruction. So we went to the Ascend Math platform, and we graded the students on the time they spent on task, their post-test results, and the notebooks that they kept with their study guides and notes in them. The dashboard feature of the program allowed students to self-monitor their progress and know how much time they were working and what benchmarks they were hitting, what gains they were making. And the best thing that we found was students were allowed to work anytime, anywhere on phones, computers, tablets. And if you know teenagers, they're asleep from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about 7 o'clock at night. And they stay up all night. And when nothing else was happening, my kids would be on working. So at least I knew they were doing something constructive. Absences ceased to be an issue because if they were absent, they could work at home. It didn't matter, so they could keep up with their stuff. I didn't have to run them down and say, you need to do makeup work. Their work was there in front of them. I actually had students working for pleasure. One student worked 15 hours a week. She was awesome. She gained 5 grade levels in 3 months. Go ahead.
Now, let me explain a little bit at this point about how Ascend Math works. First, every student in Ascend takes a level recommendation test. This adaptive assessment adjusts to each individual student. The test increases or decreases difficulty based upon the student's responses. Each test is unique just as the student is unique. The result is Theda and other educators like her know where students need to begin instruction. Using Ascend Math, students fill in the gaps starting with the earliest and working through a sequence study plan, working only on what they don't know. Now, let me get you inside the program and how it works here. First of all, when a student first logs into Ascend, there are no lessons in his plan. The student takes a short pre-assessment built around like objectives, allowing him to show what he does know. His lesson plan fills with the objectives he does not know. The student then begins the first lesson. Completing the interactive instruction and activities, the student takes a post-assessment. Passing the assessment, the student moves on to the next lesson in his plan. Now, when the lessons are completed, the student will again take a brief pre-assessment, building his lesson plan to the next stage. Let's take a look at what the student actually sees here. And if you like, you can come onto our website. You'll see the demos area. You'll be able to get into these student experiences and try any of them yourself, share them with others. This is what the student sees when he comes into Ascend Math. And it tells him where he's at and what he needs to work on next, what group of objectives he's already completed, and he will start his lesson, open the study guide, print that out unless the teacher already has pre-printed samples, and do the first couple of problems along with the video instructor.
During this lesson, we'll explore how to find area and perimeter using an area model. For this exercise,
now, these lessons are all relatively short. They are closed captioned and closed captioned in Spanish. And they are also interactive. The student needs to pay attention. How many rectangles do you see on the bottom? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, in order to move on.
Rectangle is 7 tiles along the bottom and 3 tiles along the side.
Once the student has completed the video instruction and the problems on the study guide, and again, he can pause, he can watch it as many times as needed, we'll move on to an exploration. This gives him another way of looking at this example. Try to make the area 25. They're all fairly intuitive. You can see it gives him the answer here, area 25. Now make a perimeter of 40. And there is something along these lines for every objective that he's going to face. Once he's done the explorations, he's ready for a practice test. Now we know that students, teenagers particularly, Hasida, perhaps, like to get their way through real quickly. So if he starts guessing, we not only have a way of showing him what the next answer is, very often there's individual help on the individual problem. This is very, very
building
rich
an area
with
model
instruction.
that is 8 tiles across and 4 tiles down. Draw Yolanda.
Now, only after a student has watched the instruction, filled out the study guide, done the exploration and the practice test, will the post-assessment unlock. When the student passes the post-assessment, he moves on to that next objective in line.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Some of the feedback I got from my students, because you know when you start something new, kids are always going to say, why am I doing this? Where are we going?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, I guess we're out of order a little bit. But my students were saying, this was made for me. I don't need to listen to something I don't know and I'm not ready to learn, or I don't need to listen to something I do know and waste my time. The students like the individuality of the platform and the program.
Right, so they shouldn't be working on anything that they know. That's the whole key of this, is to get them caught up quickly by filling in those skill gaps. I sometimes say the aim of Ascend Math is to get them out of Ascend Math as soon as possible.
Exactly.
They're not supposed to spend their lifetime in it, not when it's being worked as intervention. Now, this is the student dashboard for high school students, that little animated climber. I mean, that's great for elementary and middle, but for the older students, they may like this a little better, and this gives them, tells them what current objective they're working on, how far they've gotten down their plan, and how much time they spent on their task, which I'm sure is valuable to you as well, huh, Theta?
Yes, and don't fool yourself. These high school kids do like that ascend.
Oh, they like the
The
climb.
little guy
Excellent.
climbing up, and they love the yodeling and the fireworks. So don't fool yourself. They're not that grown up yet.
But one of the things is with the student dashboard is a teacher and the student can look at the same information at the same time.
Exactly.
Want to. Now, once again, let me show you. This is how, this is a representative sample of pre-assessment results. I wanted to bring it up just so that you see that students they're at different levels, all working on different skill gaps. In this example, purple means they passed the pre-assessment for that objective. Blue means they did not pass, and that objective will be included in their individual sequence study plan. So students begin instruction at the appropriate level and at their lowest skill gap, and when students are placed appropriately, they do start to see success immediately. But what kind of commitment does it take to get good results from Ascend Math? We recommend students work at least 1.5 to 2 hours each week on Ascend Math. And teachers have found several effective ways to split up this time. That's how much time Ascend takes students, but what about teachers like you? Ascend is created as a data-rich program that only requires a few minutes of your time, a few times a week, to successfully monitor student progress. Ascend Math gives you more time for your students, and Theta, I know you'll be talking about that in a few minutes.
Sure.
This is how Theta and others monitor their progress. When a teacher first comes into Ascend, this is the teacher dashboard. Gives key data on all of her classes. But let's look at one class. This is the class dashboard. The class dashboard is a perfect way to see what is going on throughout. Oops, no, I don't want that. You can see activity. You can see over here the level growth that they've made, the current level that all the students are working on, and how many levels they've completed. Now, one more thing to show here, that's this big button here, the live student tracker. This is real-time data. And you can she could see each of the students, what level they're at, what unit they're working on, what objective, how many attempts they've made at the post-assessment, the last attempt, and the next objective in line. And this is real time, so while you're in it, it may actually change. Anytime you like, you can go back to the classroom dashboard. Now, administrators like to know what's going on as well. So we give them the administrator dashboard. Here they can see the average time students are using it and the results, pre-test, post-test gain. If they're using all of their licenses, all these things that they like to be aware of. Now comes the fun part. Let's look at the wonderful results that you had last year. And I really like this slide of yours. It was a lot prettier, Theta. I put it in this pretty plain Jane PowerPoint. But if you'd like to share some of these personal observations, I'm sure they'd like to hear.
Okay, well, as I said, we started and had 300 students involved in the program. I personally was monitoring. It started out like 165 and I ended up with 148, 150, something like that. But I found that my disruptive students forgot to act out. They were, two in particular I can remember very well were ones that tested at the high level above everybody else in the classroom. And when they were challenged, they began working to their potential and forgot about messing with the other students. My special education students outperformed my expectations and in many cases outperformed the other students in the class.
Oh.
I could spend more time one-on-one with them if I needed. And I used that real-time data that he showed us that had the red and the green and the blue for the test taking attempts. I would target my students in the red and use that information for the small group instruction. Yes, this screen right here. I'd start with the red ones and I'd group them as to which objective they were on. If they were on the same objective, I'd hit 3 or 4 students at a time. And then I'd just work my way up into the yellows. And I basically used this to identify the groups of kids that were on the same objective and the groups that were having trouble passing their tests. And those were the students I targeted in order to have better results. Let's see what else was there. Long-term substitutes.
Yeah.
We got in a situation, and this is not a good situation to be in, but one of our math teachers retired in January, and the other one, we didn't have a certified teacher. And we had 2 long-term subs that were able to facilitate the program easily. So our students actually got better instruction than they would have without it. Okay, students, it's made for me. I don't have to listen to something that I already know is too complex. I can work when I'm absent, reduces the amount of makeup work they have. And that's a big thing. If you're out 2 or 3 days, you don't want to come back and have 6 days of work to do. And our students like that they could use their phone, the computer, or the tablet. They really like using the phone. If we had internet issues at school, a lot of times the kids would take their phones out and they had hotspots and they'd go ahead and work that way. And I made it a habit to make sure that if my students and the students in the other classes made progress, I'd print 2 certificates, which are embedded in the program. It's very easy to do. And I'd print one and put on the wall, and I'd print one to send home. And don't fool yourself. These kids may be in high school, but they still go crazy over stickers and little gold stars. When Halloween came around, I went to Walmart and I bought bags, big bags of Skittles candy, the trick-or-treat size. They'll kill each other for a fun-sized package of Snickers, you know. And yeah, they even play the games that are embedded in the program. Now, I've since moved on from Fair Park, and I'm at North Caddo now. And I've got 2 new teachers doing this program, or they're not new, they're both experienced, but they're both new to Ascend Math. And so I asked them what they thought. The first one, Kathy Murdoch, says that Ascend Math addresses student needs at their level. She's got a class of 10th graders that have not passed their required end-of-course exam in algebra, so she's remediating them. And she had the same situation. They're all over the map. You know, you've got 3rd grade kids in with 7th, 8th grade level kids. So she's having much better success with this. And Amelia Batong-Bacall says, using the Ascend Math program, students must demonstrate mastery of content before moving on to the next lesson. Each student moves at his or her own pace. And I want to expound on that just a little bit. Students have a tendency to try to cheat and Google things and Google the answers. Well, the way Ascend Math is set up, they've got to know something before they can Google an answer. A lot of times I found myself explaining simple things like what a ladle was, or getting them to relate and understand that a soda bottle holds 500 milliliters of liquid. A lot of our students didn't understand these basic things that we take for granted that they know. Go ahead. And, you know, if you've asked the teachers and you've asked the students, you might as well ask the administration. So I asked Renata Mahoney, who was our assistant principal of instruction when we started this thing at Fair Park, and she says she credits Ascend Math with bridging the gaps in an accelerated manner for students who were more than 3 grade levels behind. And when I say more than 3, I was teaching 10th grade, and I probably had 50% of my students score on a 3rd grade level when they took the initial level recommendation test. The differentiation learning style allowed many successes along the way that kept students motivated and highly engaged. And when she says differentiation learning styles, she's talking to the fact that they have the study guide, they have the instruction, they have the manipulative practices and exercises, and the fact that it is tailored for them on their level. And it's a wonderful thing.
Here's my favorite part, Theda, because the numbers are so good.
Okay, I have data for my class. I was not, I guess, savvy enough when we started this to realize I needed to monitor the other two classes. Of course, when we started, one of them had another teacher and the other one had a sub, but my kids had to retest. So when we started, I had 54 kids, which is close to, my ending count is close to 40% on the 3rd grade level.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a bunch.
And of course, that doesn't mean that they don't know everything in there. They may only be missing a couple of gaps.
Of concepts,
They may have a couple,
exactly.
but if they don't have those filled first, they're going to have trouble further down the line. So.
Yeah, and as you can see, that we're pretty low because when we ended at the end of 4 months, I still had 21 that were on the 3rd grade level. But, you know, I was able to move 30 of them on. And the part I like is when I moved them from level 3 to level 5. You know, that's really showing some growth from level 5 to level 8. That's doing some significant change, especially in 4 months' time.
This kind of just says this in another way, how many you had nearly 40% completed at least one grade level, moved up a functional grade level,
Right.
60% 2 levels, 3 levels. This is not unusual for us to see in a 4 to 6 month period.
That's unusual?
No, it's not unusual.
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
I mean, you're in the upper quadrant, definitely. There's no question about that. But when it's employed properly and the students have that 1.5 to 2 hours a week working on it, they can move this up. And again, it's because they have only a certain number of skill gaps at each of these grade levels. And we're focusing directly on those.
Yeah. And I'll say this was recorded in a 4-month period, and I was out of the classroom 1 month of that for something else. So really, these gains occurred in a 3-month period. And I'm seeing the same thing right now. We started the 26th of September. We're not into it 3 months yet, and I'm seeing the same kind of numbers out of it this year. Okay.
This is kind of a retelling, isn't it?
Oh, go ahead.
I think the really interesting one here is that your students most at risk increase their math score on your pre-ACT test.
Right. We used the plan metrics that they had done in 9th grade. We used their Explore score, their math sub-score, and we compared it to their plan score from last year. And, you know, it doesn't sound a whole lot. We're talking here, what, about 2.5% or 2.5 points. That's a lot. That's a lot when it's a predictor on how well they're going to do on an ACT score. And if we can get 2.5 in a couple of years, you know, we've raised an ACT score 5 points.
Now, this one I love too is the algebra passing rates, and this is according to that functional grade level that they started at.
Yes, we have an end of course test for algebra at the end of the year. These students that I had all failed the test the previous year. They'd been put in algebra when they weren't ready. So, you know, I'm like anybody else. It's all great and good, but is it really going to help my kids? Does it translate into what I need for them to do? So I actually took their end of course results after 3 months, 4 months of Ascend Math, and I wanted to see where they had to be and how I could predict that they're going to pass. So those students on the 3rd level, you know, I had like 2 or 3 of them pass. If they got to the 4th grade level, it was a 60% chance. 5th grade, it got closer to 70. 6th grade, it was an 80%. 7th grade, it was 90%. And if I could get them to the 8th grade level, they could pass the end of course test. So that tells me that they're missing that foundation that they needed, because the end of course test is not that hard. It really isn't. But if they can do 7th, 8th grade work, our test pass rate goes from 40% up to 80 or 90%, and our proficiency, because they've got to score a certain level for proficiency, our proficiency goes up from 10% to 40 or 50%, and that really affects
Excellent.
everything.
Excellent. I'll let you, any other concluding statements you want to make, and then I'd love to open it up for some questions. It's been wonderful, Theda.
Okay. Well, as I said, Ascend Math does what every teacher would like to be able to do. Provide each student with a tailor-made course of study that addresses deficiencies and allows the student to demonstrate mastery before progressing on to the next lesson. I had 131 kids. I could not begin to do what Ascend Math does for those students. I'd like to, but I couldn't. There aren't enough hours in the day. And to tell you the truth, I'm just getting too old for this. I convinced the principal at my new school to give Ascend Math a try. And though it's early, of course it's not as early as when this PowerPoint was first made, I am seeing as good or better results. And the students aren't working quite as hard. So these kids are really getting it, and they're doing what they need to do.